Good afternoon, everybody. Right in the middle of your weekend, the best part of the weekend comes on the air. It's the left versus the right with yours truly, David Patterson, and my great friend, James Flippin. Last Wednesday night into Thursday morning, James took a train down to Washington, and he was able to end the government shutdown. It's shut down. And, the aftermath, everyone blaming everyone else. But this was an interesting shutdown. It turned me off, frankly, James, because you've got to find a way to bring issues to a close. You just can't keep going on and on. We're not going to vote for this because you didn't give us that. And though President Trump called it extortion, which I think was a little bit of a that was going a little far because he was not having a problem with the government shutdown when the Republicans did it. But in the end, if we're on the right track, there's got to be Now, when I was in the legislature, we didn't have shutdowns, but what would happen is if we didn't pass the budget, we couldn't leave. And we also couldn't get paid. So when that law went into effect, I believe, under Governor Pataki in 2004, we got things done a lot quicker.
Yeah, funny how money is the ultimate motivator, I guess, for
so.
Pretty much anybody, because the members of Congress, to your point, Governor, they continue to get paid regardless of what goes on with the so-called government shutdown. I wouldn't necessarily agree with you, Governor, that it was too harsh a word to say extortion, because when you really think about it, what the Democrat Party has become now, apart from also being a haven for socialists and communists, is in essence a group of people who will stomp their feet and refuse to play ball if things aren't going the way that they want. For example, right? President Trump, despite the attempts with January 6th and all these other things, the Russiagate conspiracy, all these different attempts to smear him and make him out to be a criminal in his ascension to the White House 2.0, they tried to put him in jail again. They tried to basically say, the money you paid to some washed-up porn star so that you wouldn't try to blow up your marriage, or the, money evaluations for your buildings in New York City. All of this amounts to you not being able to run for office. That's what we're going to do. We're going to bar you from running for office, and that's how we're going to beat you. We're going to stop you that way. So in this case, the Democrats said, we love Barack Obama. He's basically our party's Jesus. So for us to save his chief achievement, quote unquote, Obamacare, we're going to have to shut this whole thing down. And maybe by doing so, we can extort the Republican lawmakers into extending a program that has ruined the state of healthcare in this country in terms of the cost of premiums and all this kind of stuff. Let's go that route rather than actually negotiating some sort of change or adopting a new policy or whatever it may be. So I think the way the Democrats work nowadays, this is pretty much par for the course. But they got the voter boost from the government shutdown in Northern Virginia and maybe even parts of New Jersey as a result of the government shutdown. They got the voter boost. They won on Election Day. And then they said, oh, wow, great. We can open the government now. Isn't that nice?
And it didn't exactly happen that way. Took a little more time. But what I will say is I agree with you about the Obamacare part of this discussion, that they wanted to extend the Obamacare for a year, right? I don't think Obamacare was such a big boom to the society and such a great saver of health and that kind of thing for that to be the issue that you're laying out for, that you're going to stay with that issue come hell or high water. I don't agree with that.
Well, the one thing I'll say, though, is that where I think Democrats were effective in this game and playing this game, I heard Bill O'Reilly talking about this on these airwaves the other day, Obamacare has a lot of name recognition. it's something that people will sort of pay attention to in
Right.
the news where they otherwise might not have. So for Democrats to sort of being able to tie the shutdown to Obamacare, which effectively we know it kind of was, that's a good PR plan, because the concept then becomes big bad Republicans fighting against the little person's health care. Oh, they don't care about the sick and the poor and all this kind of thing. So it's sort of that similar plan that we've heard for a while. Because in reality, I think it was more just about shutting the government down, period. They wanted that chaos. They wanted that negativity. They thought it was an albatross that could hang around Trump's neck at a time when most of the stuff the Democrats are sort of pushing for aren't really popular.
Well said. Now, what do you think about this? I believe that the health care incentives as they stand right now are going to be a problem in the 2026 midterms. In other words, I think those prices are going to go up, where most people are saying that they'll go down. And I think that what the Republicans would have to do, if they would even suffer a piece of advice from a Democrat, is to find a way to combat that, because that could be a really big issue in the next major election.
It's a good point. I think that the concept of people voting with their wallets is well established. You know, the run-up of inflation during the Biden White House clearly made an impact in the election of President Trump. I think that we saw it here in New York City, where the support that a Zohran Mamdani is able to gain, leaving aside all the other kind of, special woke stuff, ties back to affordability. I can save you on rent. I can save you on the bus pass. I can save you on this. All of that stuff is a very powerful motivator in the world of politics. I just don't know. Sometimes I get a little bit bemused, Governor, when we as commentators or people that watch this stuff say, this is going to be a big problem with the next midterms, or this is going to be, because inevitably it kind of always is. Whoever's in power is going to be blamed for the longstanding issues. So yeah, healthcare continues to be a very expensive thing. We deliver it at a pretty high quality in the United States, but it can cost an arm and a leg, no pun intended. And people have to have employment, in essence, to have really good insurance. So if they're self-employed or they own a business, it's going to cost them a lot of money. So I don't know if there's going to be a way to sort of like push through some sort of sweeping Medicare reform package or something with Medicaid, because we know that the states have been, really impacted by the way the big, beautiful bill changed the run out of the matching costs and all that kind of thing. So maybe there is something there. I mean, it seems to me like when you had a shutdown of 40 plus days, the concept of getting legislation or something done in 6 months seems kind of impossible. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a negative way of looking at it. I certainly don't have a high level of optimism, I guess, that the Republicans can work with the Democrats to actually figure something out that would be tantamount to meaningful legislation on the healthcare side.
When we were on last week, and I think when we were on last week, both of us were still kind of reeling from the results of the election. We did talk about the new mayor, and I'm wondering what you think about this interesting move that he made. This was, I believe, last Tuesday, when he decided to pick Dean Fullahan to be his first deputy mayor. Now, just so you know, Dean Fullahan was the budget director for the New York State Assembly under the late Speaker Sheldon Silver. And he was a whiz at, negotiation and finding the issues that would be preferable to go in the budget, and at times the ones that shouldn't make the budget. I think everybody respected him. I know that the majority leader of the Senate, Joe Bruno, respected him, and I, when I was governor, respected him. And here he is in this situation, which I found surprising. But what I would say about it is, I'm wondering how this will go over with the mayor-elect's friends, because Fullahan was a very institutional guy. Now, the one thing I will say before...
Like establishment, you mean, in essence.
Exactly.
Okay.
And but what is interesting about it is that it was what I sort of suggested last week, that if he pulled back a little bit, people might give him a little bit of a break, because he certainly was not getting one after the election last week. So my question to you is, what do you think about him kind of taking a little step back and putting some people in government who actually know how to run it?
Well, look, I think that there's a lot of hope from people who are kind of licking their wounds right now, and they are right of center, or maybe just not super left of center, saying, wow, is this going to be the real thing from Mamdani? Are we really, truly charging headfirst into socialism? Is he going to privatize the means of production? And, you know, you've heard a lot about this new plan that Mamdani has, where if the city determines that building owners aren't making the right repairs to some of these residential buildings, that in essence the city can like take them over and more or less seize that property as a result of those repairs not being made. And then you do that in combination
now, if
with...
I closed my eyes, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
No.
If I close my eyes, in fact, I think I'll close my eyes and think about what you just said, I would have thought you were talking about Trump. In other words, if they can't
in terms
fix
of the
it,
authoritarian
yes,
nature
exactly.
of it or whatever.
If they can't fix it, I'll come in and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, and look,
here's Mamdani, who would probably be shocked if he ever saw this or listened to this show and heard that
he was being compared to
he was being
Trump.
compared to Trump.
Well, I mean, the difference is, I would say, that when you have the strict duty of the federal government in terms of, like, I don't know what you're going to compare it to, maybe the deploying of the National Guard, let's say.
Right.
Places that have obfuscated their duty in terms of responding to violent crime. And then you have the federal government putting resources in place or telling Amtrak that they're going to take over the repair of Penn Station or whatever. You know, these are still involving public resources, public property, you know, things that fall under the purview of government management. The idea of a privately owned residential building falling under the hands of New York City government because repairs aren't being made, when you're already telling these landlords that there's an artificial cap at how much they can charge, right? If it's a rent stabilized building,
right,
you're artificially capped at how much money you can charge. A lot of these landlords can't make the repairs to these buildings because they're not getting enough disposable income from the property to be able to do so. So this is a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of taking over the housing stock of the city, taking over the means of production, seizing private property. So I guess there's parts of a Dean Fullahan who maybe that puts me a little bit at ease, right? You're working with somebody who understands more the means of production. Now, is he a guy who is also connected with de Blasio, Fullahan? Because I know there was somebody brought into Mamdani's transition team who was more or less the guy that kind of rubber stamped all the crazy spending plans that de Blasio had.
I think he was involved with the transition team. I don't think he actually worked for him. Now, I could be corrected, and but in this situation, it looks like he's going to be around full time.
And so I would say, look, the reality is that Mamdani's going to have to adjust some of his agenda unless there's an aspect of this or a factor that's unforeseen and that I can't really firmly make sense of right now. What would that be? Something like New York City inventing a new cryptocurrency that's going to go wild, and then the coffers of the city will be flush with cash, and you can run all these special utopian programs, and everything will be fine because money grows on trees. Literally.
Sounds fine to me.
That would be one option. The other option is that the city doesn't have the money to do all this stuff. The state of New York doesn't have all the money to accomplish this. And you also have an increasing number of the tax base that are fleeing the hostile environment for other places like Florida, Virginia, the Carolinas. So in terms of a Fullahan being a guy who can more realistically break down the options and what could be achieved, what can't be achieved, that's probably a good sign. Because I think most people would say that if Mamdani's going to be a success, he's going to have to pull back a little bit, the term you used,
right,
and go to the center and figure out a way to really prioritize what he figures is most important, or what the DSA figures is most important, or whatever. And naturally, that's going to enrage or anger or disappoint some of his supporters, because they want all of it right away. But we're already seeing that issue with Jessica Tisch. And supposedly there's going to be a meeting with Jessica Tisch and Zohran Mamdani, or they already had the meeting or whatever. And if Tisch stays in place as NYPD commissioner, that could go a long way towards solidifying the early part of the Mamdani administration.
Absolutely.
Because he already has all this criticism in his back pocket. You hate the NYPD. You said they were racist. You came out against them during the George Floyd stuff. If a solid, politically connected individual like Tisch stays in place as NYPD commissioner, it could go a long way towards boosting the early part of the Mamdani team.
So let's look at the flip side of that, which I think we got into a little bit last week. So, all right, Mamdani comes in. He gets an institutional player to be part of his administration. He gets a few people that really, you could safely say represent the establishment to be in his administration. He moves forward, and he's going to keep Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch. Mm-hmm. And then, but the question is, I am sure that his comrades, remember de Blasio called the Democratic candidates comrades one night? Yes. His comrades may not like this, that their view is more about destruction and not about improving quality of life. Mm-hmm. And do you think it's possible that they might start to publicly castigate him? Because all you've got to do when you're a socialist is take one step to the right after you took 100 steps to the left, and people might not like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think that it's certainly possible that you have the far left flank continuing to criticize almost anything that someone's going to do that strays from the really, truly dyed-in-the-wool, progressive, Marxist, communist agenda. And Mamdani's going to have to make a decision. Does he want to be a continuous hero to the left and someone who went down in a ball of flames as they tried to drag the city kicking and screaming into some sort of Soviet gulag? Well, that's his choice. But if he wants to be a two-term mayor, and if he wants to be a person who can successfully parlay this into a run for president or whatever it may be, he is going to have to actually govern towards the city's best interests. And clearly the concept of destroying the NYPD would not be in the city's best interests. He can make tweaks. He can try to bring on these mental health teams that he thinks are going to be super successful in terms of going out and calling certain domestic violence situations, whatever. But if he's going to bring in someone and then try to totally dismantle the NYPD and all that they stand for, he will be a one-term mayor. So I think that that's where he's going to have to stiff-arm some of that stuff from the DSA. And I predict he will.
Wow. Well, he might be going beyond a one-term mayor, but we can't go beyond our time here because we have some commercial messages that need to be heard, some business to take care of. So we just thank you for listening to this portion of The Left versus the Right. I'm David Patterson. I'm with